How's it going, internet? It's been a while since I made a video like this. So the other day, I was in the shower after a long and hard day of backbreaking American labor at my slavish job of UPS. While in the shower, I was trying to think of some new ideas for internet videos to put up on the YouTubes. But instead of thinking of video ideas, for whatever reason, my mind drifted to my middle school career. You see, for those of you who don't know, I recently started college, so I have school on the mind. I have a bit of the homework, I have a bit of the class workshop assignments, you know? So, with this new era of education starting in my life, I suppose my mind was just sort of instinctively thinking back on more youthful and more hopeful times. What exactly was I thinking of, though, while I was thinking of middle school? Was I thinking of friends long gone? Was I thinking of a teacher or teachers that struck a chord with me? Was I thinking of how fucking miserable I was the whole time because middle school is one of the worst things that a kid can go through? Well, actually, yes to that last one, actually. You see, as a kid, I didn't attend just one middle school, I attended 2 middle schools in the state of Virginia. The second middle school I went to was the one where I met the friends that I have today. It's the one where my current relationships have blossomed from, and it is the school that started me on the path to being the person I am today, for better or for worse.
Definitely for worse.
However, the first middle school I attended was an extension of my late elementary school career, and it was one of the worst things that I ever went through. But, so what? That doesn't make me unique. Every kid has a bad school experience. Most American children probably go to a shit middle school at some point in their life. So, if my experience isn't that unique, why exactly am I coming to you with this outdated 2016-esque commentary video, or something on the level of what Turkey Tom would produce in 2022? Well, I'll tell you why. Because my experience in my early middle school career was quite unique. It may not be a single standout level of unique, but it was unique in the sense that I'm willing to bet that most American children have not gone through what I have gone through, the things that I've seen, the awful things that I've had to do just to come out with my sanity intact. Oh, that's good. You see, I didn't go to just any other regular dime a dozen American public middle schools. No. The first middle school I ever attended was dominated by a deeply rooted caste system, comparable only to that of India's own caste system. For those of you who don't know what a caste system is, it is basically a very strict and structurized class system that is very hard to move up the ladder with, and very hard to move down the ladder with. And that is what I'm here to explain to you today, YouTube, because I think that it is quite an interesting topic to discuss. So sit back, relax, and let this stupid, dumb geek explain to you something that has no relevance or bearing on your life. But hey, it's still pretty interesting nonetheless. So as I talk about the middle school caste system, I will go ahead and put this artist rendition of what I think the caste system looks like somewhere on screen. It could be over here on the left, it could be over here on the right, the center, the sky's the limit. So it may look a little weird, as most caste systems, and most class systems for that matter, are typically triangular in their depiction, whereas what I am showing you is more akin to a rhombus or diamond shape for those of you who are not geometry whiz kids. Well, it's very simple, because most students were not unique either way. Most of them did fall into the middle category of just being easy to ignore and not being able to stand out on their own. From top to bottom, you have the most unpopular kids to the most popular kids. I went ahead and excluded the teachers from this caste system because, quite frankly, they didn't really play much of a role in the ecosystem or socio-political environment of my middle school. God, this is gonna be so fucking stupid. A few things to point out before we continue. The middle of the road middle class, the breachers as I like to call them. Typically speaking, if you were a new student to the middle school, you would automatically be placed here, and you were able to set your position pretty much wherever you wanted, given how well your first impressions went. The Rednecks also kind of have their own spot. I'd say that they were not as popular as the Breachers, who I will explain their popularity of later, but they were definitely more popular than the people at the very bottom. With all of this out of the way, let's explain the classes of this system in more depth. We're going to be starting from the very bottom and working our way up to the top. At the very bottom, we have the geeks, the nerds, and the unpopulars. You could consider them to be the untouchables of this caste system, because they are the bottom of the barrel. They are the most loser of the losers. They are the most unremarkable of the unremarkable in the eyes of the kids above them. And unfortunately, in middle school, I'd say that this is where I was. I was definitely a geek, a dork, a nerd in middle school. I only had dork friends. I only had nerd friends, except for one friend who was in the breacher class, which I will explain more in depth later. But you know what? I carry that moniker with pride. I am a dork, and I am proud. So, if you were in this class, what exactly could you expect to find? This was the class that everyone liked to pick on. It was the punching bag of the school. If you were in here, you could expect to be bullied by someone above you at least a few times a week. Unless, of course, you were lucky enough to have someone above you to be your friend. However, that was not the case for most of these kids. They kinda kept to their own in-groups within this class and never moved above. I can't really blame them though, because these are very trivial problems. And ultimately, the rest of your life is not determined by which of the classes you fell into. I was not that smart. My entire middle school career, I tried climbing the social hierarchy. However, that only brought me lower and lower within my own low class. To all you middle schoolers who may or may not be watching this, for one thing, please don't watch my channel. Second thing, don't try climbing the social hierarchy. Stay right where you are. It will, in the long run, be more profitable for you. Above the geeks, the nerds, and the unpopulars, you have the rednecks. The rednecks were typically never very popular. No one above them or underneath them ever really wanted to interact with them at all. However, they definitely did command more respect and more prestige than the nerds, the the dorks, and the unpopulars below them. None of them ever really wanted to move out of their social space in the first place, typically staying in one very large in-group. They had one or two tables at the lunch room, the cafeteria, and they never moved from those tables whatsoever. They always stayed there. They were very loyal to each other. So despite being unpopular, they definitely had an advantage in social placement. And that is because no one ever bothered them and they all had friends. So yes, they were very unpopular, but if you fell within the redneck class, you were also probably very happy with where you were. Above them, we have the middle of the middle, the typical kid in the middle school, the most populous kid in the middle school. We have the breacher class. You may be wondering why exactly I'm calling them the breacher class. Well, that's very simple. Typically speaking, these kids had mixed relations with the classes above and below them. They weren't popular enough to be considered popular in their own right, but they were popular enough to the point where they could afford to interact with almost anyone and not jeopardize their social standing at all. One of my best friends at the time was actually in the breacher class. I won't say his name, but I'll just go ahead and call him C. Friend C was a very, very breacher kid. In fact, I'd actually label him as top breacher. He was friends with me, a geek. He had another couple of geek friends. He had some redneck friends, and he even had a couple of friends at the very tippy top of the hierarchy. Those are the breachers in a nutshell, able to breach out of where they are, whether it means going below where they are or above where they are. If you were a breacher, you were probably one of the luckiest kids. Nothing was expected from you, and you had everything to gain. Not inherently popular kids, but definitely more noteworthy than everyone below them. Above that, you have the friend friends of the popular kids. These were kids that they themselves never did anything worth of note. They didn't really play sports, they didn't really do anything after school. In many ways, they actually reflect the breacher class below them. But whereas the breachers didn't inherently have any social standing one way or the other, the friends of popular kids were, well, the friends of popular kids. They had best friends in high places, and this inherently meant that they were closer to the more popular kids. They sat at the popular tables, they ate with the popular kids at lunch. During gym time, they would get into basketball teams with these kids. Yes, they didn't do anything inherently noteworthy, or anything worth making them popular, but just because of who they were friends with, they got many, many privileges and many, many middle schoolyard rights. Above that, you have minor popular kids. Minor popular kids are where we start to get into the very pretentiously popular mindset. Minor popular is where that snobby attitude begins to develop. While a geek or nerd or unpopular at the very bottom could occasionally have a breacher friend, this is typically where they would never have any friends at all. The idea of a geek, nerd, or unpopular being friends with even a minor popular kid is unthinkable. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. Minor popular kids, however, really didn't do anything special. Some of them may have had good grades, some of them may have had awful grades, some of them may have done some after-school activities, some of them may not have, but they all cared about the clothes they wore. They all had the newest iPhones and newest gadgets, and they lived in the biggest houses on the block. And they had plenty of friends above them. Interestingly enough, minor popular consisted mostly of the girlfriends of the boys above them, because at the end of the day, dating in middle school is not real emotion. It is nothing more than a popularity contest. And falling into the minor popular class is one of the benefits of this. And finally, we have the tippy top of the caste system, the major popular kids. One of the largest groups of people within the major popular class were football players. Speaking of football players, many soccer players actually fell within the minor popular category. But if you played football, you were, indeed, major popular. The major popular kids could be friends with anyone they wanted to befriend. They had the newest iPhones, they had the newest shoes, they practically lived in brick manors, living in pools of their parents' generous allowances. These were the bourgeois of the middle school play yard. That actually reminds me of a very cringy story. In the beginning of the 7th grade, I actually signed up for the football team, and I actually got accepted. I did this for no other reason than to climb the social hierarchy. I don't know anything about football. I didn't know anything about football back then. Back then, I was a smaller, more beta male than I am now, if you can even believe that. And middle school football was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. Even more miserable than that time I did welding in high school because my mom wanted me to do it. But that's a story for another time. Every single week, you'd hear about the major popular kids. You'd hear about how they got a new boyfriend or girlfriend. You'd hear about how they failed or passed another class. You'd hear their successes on the football team on the intercom in the morning announcements. They were everywhere. Teachers praised them. The minor popular loved them. And the breachers could easily befriend them if they tried, and if they actually gave a shit. So yes, displaying the entire caste system as artistically depicted here, these are the classes. So how exactly can one move up this caste system if they so desired? Well, like I kind of explained so far, that was something that was very hard to do. I signed up for the football team, but didn't move an inch up the social hierarchy. Simply put, there really was no way for you to move up. In my entire 1.5 years attending this first middle school, I never once ever saw someone move up the hierarchy and stay there permanently. A couple of rednecks might have moved down to geek level, and a couple of breachers, even though they were breachers, might have hung out more with the geeks than other breachers and anyone above them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were moved down a peg. Moving up and down the system is very, very hard, and I don't think I ever saw someone do it. So simply put, how you move up and stay there I really can't answer that. So yes, that is where I'm going to leave this cringy 2015-2016 era commentary-esque video with gameplay in the background. Middle school is no doubt an evil and dark place. It will make or break anyone who enters it. But as long as you have favorable traits that are beyond your control, more to do with who you are born to, well, maybe you might just get a good spot on that social hierarchy. But if you're poor, get with the geeks. Anyway, I don't really know how to end this. Bye.
हम कहते हैं कि कल होगी नए साल की शानदार शुरुआत